Okay, boys, you already know that recently I've been farming a lot of Guild Wars 2 content on this channel. Now, the reason I've been consuming so much of it is because the response from you guys was amazing. I enjoyed thoroughly interacting with each and every one of you. I think your comments are a huge boon to this channel. I've been having a blast contacting with you guys and reading your comments, and it was just fun. I love interacting with you guys. It has been truly amazing. I know most of you want me to try this damn game for myself because I've been experiencing so much of it through YouTube. At this point, I might as well just play it now. I will most likely give it a try, but right now I have so much on my plate, real life stuff, real life work. It is what it is. It kind of sucks. I'm not doing this full time, but maybe in the future, right? Maybe in the future, that's where we aiming towards. For now, I found a really interesting video. Is Guild Wars 2 worth playing in 2025? We're towards the end of the year. Regardless, I think this video is still very much relevant. And, I haven't seen any of it, so hopefully it will be good.
Guild Wars 2 is a free-to-play MMO that features a massive explorable base game with hundreds of hours of horizontal progression, all wrapped up in a class-based hybrid action combat system where essentially you use a combination of tab target as well as action combat elements. Guild Wars 2 was originally released 13 years ago.
Hey, which expansions these locations are from? Oh my god! What the hell? This is beautiful!
In 2012 and served as the sequel to Guild
Look
Wars
at
1.
that.
Though the game's look, play,
that's
and
definitely
feel
Heart of
pretty
Thorns,
dramatically
right?
different, many people at the time were unhappy with just how different
do we have captions?
felt from the original.
Nah,
However,
really.
these days it's heralded as one of the best free-to-play MMOs available currently. I personally played Guild Wars 2 for the first time in 2023. This was actually the first MMO I covered on my channel outside of RuneScape, and the video did quite well. This would dictate my shift to more general MMO content, and really marks the last time I felt true, genuine happiness.
Ooh.
I'm kidding, but I am excited to hop back into Guild Wars 2. I've played this game on and off, finishing up the main story progression for most of the expansion into Guild Wars 2.
Oh!
I've played this game on and off, finishing up the main story progression for the most.
I'm in, baby. Count me in. I'm downloading this game right now.
Of the expansions, but since my last time playing, there has been a new expansion.
Now you're talking.
Janthir Wilds. Also, an announcement
Is that a bear sitting inside of arena?
There has been a new expansion, the Janthir Wilds.
Wait, what in God's name? Okay. Damn. I did not expect that at all.
Also, an announcement of an upcoming expansion at the end of October called Visions of Eternity, which
Wait, there was a new expansion to Guild Wars 2? How didn't I even heard of that? That's interesting. Visions of Eternity.
Sounding pretty fantastic as well, especially since ArenaNet
at the end of October. So this expansion is already out by now? Wait, what? Man, I swear to God, whenever... it's so annoying. Whenever you hear about any other game expansion, for some reason, every MMO player knows about it. Like, it doesn't matter which MMO he plays, but whenever something comes from Guild Wars 2, nobody really hears of it. It's so annoying. I don't know if YouTube just hate this game or something, but why don't I get this recommended to me? All I search online is MMO and ARPG content. So why the hell I hear about New World's expansion that a few months later the game itself dies, but I never heard about Guild Wars 2? Like anything, nothing at all. That is so weird. I hear about older MMOs even, like, RuneScape. Well, RuneScape is extremely popular, so that's a pretty bad example. But Star Wars Online and stuff, like things I'm not really interested about. But Guild Wars 2, I never hear anything about it. This is so fishy. I don't know what the hell is going on there. Maybe something with the algorithm.
Has been teasing a bunch of what are now confirmed new elite specializations, basically adding a fourth spec to every class and adding a ton of new playstyle options for people.
So every expansion comes with a new weapon, right? And a new weapon obviously means new abilities and stuff. That's cool. So you have Bard now? Okay, that's dope. That's actually dope.
Play these classes. With all that being said, Guild Wars 3 is confirmed. We know nothing more other than the fact that it is actively being worked on. However, ArenaNet has mentioned that they will continue putting out content for Guild Wars 2 at the same pace. And they say this will have no effect on the quality of updates we see in Guild Wars 2. So,
to be fair, Path of Exile said this too. We did like GGG. And we seen that wasn't the case. They couldn't keep up the pressure. So I really hope their promise will remain true to like huge Guild Wars 2 fans. But I mean, as I see it right now, the current trend is that it will not hold.
Let's find out. Is Guild Wars 2 worth...
And also, I'm not gonna lie, it's one of the things that makes me not want to play Guild Wars 2 is the fact that you have 3 coming, which right now it's in development, so they're probably gonna be many years until it comes. But I will 100% play Guild Wars 3, for sure, when it comes out.
In the year 2025. So I've played Guild Wars 2 here and there on and off since my original review in 2023. I've done some world PvP, finished up some of the expansions, created a bunch of free level 80 characters that I'm really not sure what to do with. But one thing always surprises me when I log back in, just how ridiculously large the Char character model is. Like, this thing is an absolute beast. Anyway, as you can tell, I play a Char Ranger who is spec'd as Soul Beast, which basically means you're using your pets and even combining with your pets and their powers in order to do bigger damage. It's a pretty bursty class, and logging in, I always completely forget how to play it, and to top it off, apparently the build I was originally following has changed quite a bit. So, to refamiliarize myself...
Bro, following builds though? I mean, I don't know. You should play Guild Wars for yourself. I think you should play any game for yourself without following any builds whatsoever. That way you can really gauge how good the game is at explaining to you the core mechanics and, you know, just improve yourself as a player. But maybe it's just a me thing. I never loved following builds.
I immediately looked into my journal, which is possibly the most important interface across the entire game. Here you're going to find everything from equipment to cosmetics to one of the most in-depth and important achievement systems to your elite specializations, and what I was looking for, my story quest progress. Story quests in Guild Wars are how you first advance and unlock
I enjoyed how it
most
was
content
ordered
in the game. Currently, I've completed most of the main expansion storylines, which we'll get into each of the expansions and its benefits later on. But when I last left off, I was about halfway through the 4th expansion, which was released in 2023, Secrets of the Obscure. So I decided to make my way back there and try and reintegrate myself into the story as well as the combat and feel of the game. But before I get into each part of the game, from the base game to every expansion and how content is progressed and added to Guild Wars 2, it's first important to really understand the beauty of Guild Wars 2. And to do this, you need to properly understand the difference between horizontal and vertical or linear progression.
There it is.
This has been
the main contention point of Guild Wars 2. Just being a horizontal game, which is completely different to what us MMO players are used to.
Been hashed out about 1 million times in the MMO community, and no one can come to a super concise agreement on this topic, but at least for me, vertical progression is when you are constantly chasing new levels of power. If a piece of gear enters the game and it's the most powerful piece of gear, in a vertical system, you can expect that after a few more years or a few updates, that gear would...
Verticality is basically like having a finish line. When you don't have a finish line like Guild Wars 2, I think most players are not gonna start the race. Because the race is just circular and there is no stopping point. You just kind of run around and you can even continue where you left off. Which most players, most Guild Wars 2 players says, hey, that's what we love about the game. And I totally respect that, by the way. But at the same time, I can also say that linear gamers don't really like that. They like having a finish line. They like having a game where they can play, reach a certain point, and then just quit when they feel powerful enough. And now you can completely say, oh, but it negates past expansions and all of that stuff. And you are 100% correct about that. That is absolutely true. Nobody's arguing otherwise. But at the same time, most people, I think, don't really care about that. And from my perspective, I think that Blizzard, I'm going to take Blizzard, for example, with World of Warcraft. They can make a system that still forces you to experience the past expansion and make them relevant. Because Final Fantasy XIV has done so, and it works phenomenally. And you have the mentorship system, which incentivizes veteran players, go back and help newer players. And there's just this really good, healthy cycle of old players and new players interacting with each other, playing older expansions. So it is possible to implement in vertical settings, but it's also way more difficult to develop, for sure. But the horizontal way of just making power same all across the board, I think most players won't find them to their liking. I think it's just reality, right? Because at the end of the day, World of Warcraft somehow still reigns supreme. It has all the players. I do really think that that is due mostly to Classic WoW being still the king of MMOs, like unshakable. I think if only retail was available, the numbers would 100% be lowered. But at the same time, WoW is still the king. And, that's just the unfortunate reality, because even as a WoW player, I hate that.
Which was once the most powerful, is now no longer the most powerful. Probably the most popular example of vertical progression in the MMO space is World of Warcraft.
There it is. I haven't pre-watched this video, by the way. I haven't. It's just so easy to predict what everyone are going to say, because I've seen so many videos about Guild Wars 2 by now that I actually understand like how the casual MMO player thinks. Because I'm a casual MMO player. Well, not a casual. I'm more like semi-hardcore, I guess you can say it. But I think most players do play like me or at a little bit of a lower level. So I can get that mentality and I can easily assess what, every content creator is going to say. Because it's fairly predictable.
With every new expansion, basically all of the armor and weapons from the previous expansion is deemed irrelevant. However, with Guild Wars 2,
and with current retail World of Warcraft, even the last patch is null and void, and it is useless. Once you progress through a patch and a new patch comes out, the old patch is irrelevant. And that just sucks. That's like really bad problem at retail. They completely took verticality and maxed it to the point where nobody wants to play anymore. And I think that's why most people run away to Classic.
Gear that was the most powerful within the first few years of the game's release is still among, or at least equal to, some of the gear that is most powerful now, 13 years later. It's important to note that metas change and updates will still have effects on what is actually the best items to use. However, the raw stats on the best in slot gear 10 years ago are still basically equivalent to the stats on the best pieces of gear today. In some ways,
and that's really bad for vertical gamers, because vertical gamers want the brand new shiny thing. They don't want the old toy they already played with. And it goes back to, I don't know, human primate mentality where you just want to bonk the hardest, but it's still a thing. And that's why all of these vertical MMOs are, what most people are usually going for.
It can actually be quite a bit more difficult from a design point of view to make and balance a horizontal
It's human
game.
psychology.
Every update needs to be curated, and you can imagine the longer the game has existed and the more prior updates that have happened would require a bigger and bigger backlog of checks in order to keep things working properly. For example, if the previous expansion for retail WoW has
dude, look at this garbage.
For example,
can you believe that this was a real expansion? If you told me this was fan-made, I would have 100% believed you. Look at that trash. Oh my god, that is revolting. Dragonflight. Eesh, Dragon Blight.
The previous expansion for retail WoW had some glaring balance issues. Well, at least when the next expansion is released, it's basically like starting over. There's plenty more.
Yeah, he's actually making a good point. I think that soft resetting everything is also really healthy for the game, and a lot of players love that. And I will take Path of Exile as an example, because Path of Exile, you play the game, and then you quit. New league comes out, and everyone comes back flocking into the game. Because if you don't know how it works, basically in PoE you have leagues. You play, you do whatever, you max out your character, you do whatever you want to do. And when you feel like you're powerful enough or you achieved your goals that you set yourself to do, you just quit the game. 3 months passed, you get a new league. Everything you did previously has been removed from the game. It's essentially has been moved to like a standard server where you have everything. It's like Legacy, but nobody really plays that. And now everyone starts from scratch at the new league. And I think that a lot of players, myself included, loves that soft reset. I think that the jump from vanilla to TBC was really great because a lot of people who couldn't afford mounts back in the day because they started really late could have afforded them now. And also the gear was easily accessible through the first few quests. Now, I don't know, maybe some of you watching this video are Guild Wars players and you don't like that system, and I completely respect that. But I think a lot of us vertical gamers do.
Which goes into the design philosophy of a horizontal progression game. For example, what is the reward space? How do you adequately award players without player power necessarily increasing? It's a good question, and as we go through this review of Guild Wars 2, hopefully I can come closer to answering that for you.
Yeah.
So, with all that being said,
you reward them through masteries and achievements, but the problem is that a lot of players don't care about that. Personally, for me, I love achievement hunting, but I'm fully aware that a lot of players do not care about that. Most players, again, I sound like a broken record. Most players want to get stronger. It's that human greed and power fantasy that fuels the urge to play the game over and over again until you reach the point where you are essentially the most powerful. And that's what makes it's a carrot on a stick, pretty much, right? It just makes you go forward in a straight line and you're just not stopping until you're reaching a point where it is essentially unattainable. Because you're never going to become the strongest unless you play the game like 24/7, and most people don't do that because they have jobs. But it's that idiotic voice in the back of your mind that tells you that you can do it, that makes you keep logging into the game. I don't know, it's addiction, whatever. It's just human psychology at the end of the day. And I think that's why most people love verticality.
Guild Wars 2 is basically the king of horizontal progression when it comes to MMOs. But really, Guild Wars 2 takes the cake in this regard, mostly just due to its staggering amount of horizontal content. For example, reaching the max level of 80 in Guild Wars 2 is widely considered to just be the tutorial. This takes you through most, if not all, of the base game zones, as well as the entire base game story. But once you're level 80, you're still working on a horizontal system known as masteries, and your character will acquire mastery points, which are account-wide. Within this mastery system, you'll find a plethora of...
And mind you, most people look at this system. I look at this and I think that this is great, but most players look at that and they think, oh man, I have so much to do. I'm so far behind. And they just end up being overwhelmed and quitting the game. And again, it's just reality. It doesn't mean that this is bad. I'm not saying any of this is bad. Personally, I love this. But most players look at this and they quit. And that's a problem.
Unlocks almost similar to something you might find in a single-player RPG. These can be completely game-changing unlocks with things like housing systems and flying mounts and sailing and fishing, and basically an account that is maxed out every mastery versus a fresh level 80 is pretty much playing an entirely different game. Just within the game currently, there are 36 different mastery tracks with over 700 obtainable mastery points that you can put into these tracks. Completing this entire endeavor would most likely take thousands of hours, and this is only set to increase with the new expansion coming out in just a couple of months. So now that you understand a bit how progression works in Guild Wars 2 in this sort of non-vertical, more horizontal sense of reward space, I want to quickly go through what you can expect from Guild Wars 2 as a free player, and then go through each of the expansions and explain what you can expect from those as well. So, the base game. This is what you get perfectly for free. Download the game and voila, you have access to literally hundreds of hours of content. You can follow the base game all the way to the max level of 80. There is...
I didn't even know that. That's so generous. You can play through the entire base game? Damn, that's crazy. I do know you don't have a mount. You only have it for a limited time. I do remember that one.
It's a ridiculously large map, all sectioned off into many, many different zones. And completing all of this content is absolutely no joke of a time investment. You have to realize that for the first 2 years of this game's existence, it did not operate on a free-to-play model. So everything here was once locked behind a paywall. And of course, in order to justify that price, they had to make sure the players had plenty of content to sink their teeth into. Now, in terms of first impressions, as this will be the first part of the game that you interact with as a new player, the graphics, the landscape, the story, the gameplay, people might say it's a bit bland in comparison to the expansions, which is, of course,
okay, dude, I was about to flip here, but he said compared to the expansion. Okay, he saved himself there, because the game looks stunning. But that being said, I only played the core game, and some areas did look a bit dull, but I must say, most areas are found to be amazing, especially the art. The human art where the castle is. Sorry, I forgot the name. It's been so long ago. God damn, it was so good. Like, my God, it was amazing. I remember just walking there, and I achieved like one mastery point there, I remember. It was so fun. It was so damn good.
But it's really here where you first get introduced to the gameplay loop of Guild Wars 2. And honestly, it won't really change much, even as you get farther and farther into the game and the new expansions. Now, I remember in my original Guild Wars 2 review, I mentioned that the first hour I felt a little lost and honestly a little bored.
It reminds me of Minas Tirith. It is so good. Clearly, they took inspiration from that, right? Or Anne Orlando. Look at that. This is gorgeous. Holy, this is so good. Man, it's crazy. I can't believe that nobody's talking about this game almost. It just feels too surreal.
First hour, I felt a little lost and honestly,
People don't even mention
I
it.
think that's a common experience for people who might be new to the game. This is because Guild Wars 2 requires almost a bit of a mindset shift in terms of understanding how to enjoy the game.
Not almost. It requires a complete overhaul of the way that your mind used to think about MMOs. Because you're not asking players to learn new stuff, you're asking them to unlearn everything they knew until this point about MMOs. And that's also a huge problem. I gave this example in a previous video, like yesterday video, that, I used to play League of Legends for 2 years, and then I moved to Dota 2. And when I moved to Dota 2, I had such a bad time learning the game, and I almost quit because the game was just too different. They were vastly different. Even though they're both MOBA games, if you played League and Dota, you know what I'm talking about. The games don't even operate at the same level. So jumping from League, which was so easy, to Dota, which was way more difficult, and don't get me wrong, I think Guild Wars 2 is not too much of a difficult game to understand, but to a linear Andy, which play vertical MMO, where you just go in a straight line, playing Guild Wars 2 is a lot more confusing. So moving between these two games that have a completely different shift, not only it is extremely difficult because you have to learn all this new stuff, it also kind of hurts the ego of the player because they thought they knew anything and everything about MMOs until they reach Guild Wars 2. And then they realize they don't know anything. And you have all of these veterans running around with like million mastery points and cool mounts and glides and all of that stuff. And you are very confused as a new player. And again, it's very overwhelming and it leads to frustration, which leads to player quitting the game. And it's not me being like salty or anything, it's just reality. And that's what happened to me. Now, that being said, I am going to probably try this game again very soon. I'm still thinking about it. I have so much on my plate. I really hope I can pull myself together and be able to play this. But the first time that I have played, this was the reason for why I quit the game.
Progression feels and operates a little differently than your standard MMO, and if you've played any Elder Scrolls Online, you're going to find it has a very similar gameplay loop. Basically, in terms of leveling and experiencing the game, this is going to be done almost entirely through map exploration and completion. Each zone has access to story quests, vistas, landmarks, waypoints for fast travel, side quests, solo events, group events, side events, and even main events where you might kill world bosses or multiple world bosses. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, who's going back to the base game and participating in these events?
Everyone.
Well, pretty much everyone who plays the game.
Yep,
you see,
that's the beauty of it.
has taken this horizontal progression system so seriously that they have attempted to combat almost any content ever truly becoming irrelevant. Seriously, just looking on the wiki, you can find this event timer, which shows you all of the main events across every zone, across all expansions and DLC, and it tells you the time and location of every single event. There's going to be a group of players running these events at all hours of the day. This is due to the fact that one might drop a currency or a rare item or something that needs to be acquired for some achievement or some legendary. I say all of this just to let you know that even while leveling through the base game, you're going to constantly be surrounded by other players. These people might be working on map completion or events or acquiring some currency or resource that's only accessible in that zone. They've truly done probably the best job, in my opinion, when it comes to creating a living, breathing, persistent MMO world.
And that's the strongest point of Guild Wars 2 and what makes it so desirable. Because whenever you play World of Warcraft and you play retail, you literally play inside of a dead world. I don't know if you guys have ever played WoW, because I know many of the people watching this video is like already a WoW player or just Guild Wars 2 player. So I don't know if the Guild Wars portion that watches my videos actually played WoW. If you don't, like, continue, like, don't come into this game anytime soon, unless you're playing Classic, and then it's fine. But regardless, if you ever played WoW, you know that the new player experience is absolutely trash because you see exactly 0 players in the entire world. Throughout your leveling experience, you will see nobody. You just play RP event inside of a dead world, and you just skip through everything to try and reach the latest zone, which is the relevant part of the game, because you actually want to experience, interactions with people. But to be fair, when you do interact with people at that zone, you wish you hadn't, because everyone that's left inside of the game is super toxic min-maxer. And, at this part, most players do quit.
And while that's a selling point for the entire game across all of
Good
its
old World of
expansions,
Warcraft.
it's especially a selling point for the base game, which might seem a little lackluster, like I said, when compared to the expansions. Now that you understand what you're going to get for free, let's talk about what you can pay for in Guild Wars 2. I think it's important I give you a quick overview of all of the previous expansions leading up to Janthir Wilds. And then I'll show you my experience with Janthir Wilds, and we'll talk more about the upcoming expansion.
Robot.
Now, one important thing to note is that you won't have access to a mount within
I've seen this goddamn turtle everywhere. Is this like a good mount? I've seen this turtle in so many videos by this point. It looks so sick, dude. It reminds me kind of Pandaria, like Mist of Pandaria mounts.
The base free game in Guild Wars 2. In fact, acquiring most mounts in the game requires at least the Path of Fire expansion, which is actually the second expansion that was ever released. Luckily, the first two expansions, which are the Heart of Thorns and the Path of Fire, come as a package deal, and they're heavily discounted. Usually you can pick up both of them for about $30. And ArenaNet does tend to have sales throughout the year where you can buy all of the expansions with a pretty heavy discount, so make sure to keep your eyes peeled for those. Now, the Heart of Thorns was released in 2015 and Path of Fire in 2017. Every expansion adds a new zone and a set of maps to the game, along with a ton of additional story, and usually mixes up how you play the game pretty intensely. For example, the Heart of Thorns introduced the new region, the Heart of Maguma, which included 4 separate playable maps. But it also added the Mastery system. Prior to this, Masteries didn't really exist in Guild Wars 2.
Masteries didn't exist until Heart of Thorns? That's crazy. Wow, I thought it was a base game thing. Okay, that's good to learn.
And the main feature of the Mastery system within Heart of Thorns was the addition of the glider, basically allowing you to jump from high up places and glide down to lower places. Throughout the new maps, you could find a ton of different ways to interact with the glider, and all of those would fit into this new Mastery system. While I personally don't love the Heart of Thorns maps myself, it did release one of my favorite events to ever exist within Guild Wars 2, where you and a bunch of other players will fight a boss known as Octobrine, which completely opens up the center of the map within the Auric Basin zone. And also, you get 27 loot chests, so basically once this boss is defeated, you can go on an absolute looting spree. The first time I ever experienced this, it completely blew my mind. Even 10 years later after this expansion's release, it's a total masterclass on dynamic, map-changing, player-driven, and rewarding world events. Now, as I mentioned before, after Heart of Thorns, you get Path of Fire. This expansion takes place in a sort of Egyptian desert zone, and it's actually my personal favorite expansion out of the entire game. First of all, the desert aesthetic, along with the small oases and the cities and the overall vibes, are just fantastic. But most importantly, Path of Fire added one of the most unique mount systems to ever exist in the MMO space. You have to realize that prior to 2017, mounts were just not a thing in Guild Wars 2. You had your player character and your glider from...
It's crazy to even think about that, because Guild Wars 2 is literally known for their insane mounting experience. And it's kind of weird to see that I don't know what the hell happened to me there, but it's kind of weird to see that it's relatively new. But that being said, World of Warcraft is doing their best to copy them. That being said, it's also trash. I mean, WoW truly took the best part of Guild Wars 2 and made it worse. I don't know how Blizzard is managing to pull this off every single time, but kudos to them. They're really great.
Heart of Thorns, but no mount. Path of Fire completely changed this by adding 5 new mounts to the game at its release, and later on 7 in total.
I remember
Each of these mounts operates completely differently. Sure, they all increase your base movement speed, but they also function in different ways to help you navigate throughout the world. For example, you have the Raptor, which can jump long distances, the Rabbit, which can jump high distances, the Skimmer, which can traverse across water, and Path of Fire even introduced the first sort of flying mount, the Griffin. Though this Griffin hardly operates like any flying mount you might be used to in other games, as it can't really ascend or hover. But there are mounts that are later additions in later expansions that can. I think Path of Fire is probably the single most important expansion to get in terms of just raw upgrades for your account. If you're okay with spending money while playing through the base game, I always highly recommend that people at least pick up Path of Fire, because this will actually grant you the Raptor mount to use while you're playing the base game. Anyway,
Pog.
moving on. After Path of Fire, you have End of Dragons, which was released in 2022. This added the beloved Cantha region, which was familiar to many original Guild Wars 1 players.
Damn, it looks good.
Featuring a sort of step up in technology with more oriental city-like landscapes, this was my personal least favorite
Jade
expansion in terms of story and questing.
Everything.
However, it did add some pretty important masteries, such as being able to use a skiff to traverse across water and also fishing, which I guess didn't exist in Guild Wars 2 prior to 2022. It's kind of crazy to think about an MMO with no fishing. End of Dragons also added Jade
That's
bots,
actually
strike
surprising.
missions, tons of new playable content, obviously, and
turtles.
even a new multiplayer mount, the Siege Turtle. But honestly, I don't interact with much of the content from this expansion except for fishing from time to time. Though I have to admit the aesthetic was pretty awesome. And moving on to where I left you all halfway through in the beginning of this video, Secrets of the Obscure. I somehow both love and hate this expansion. I'm not sure. It's hard to explain. In Secrets of the Obscure, you're going to get access to a new mount almost immediately, known as the Skyscale. This is the true flying mount within Guild Wars. It can ascend and hover and jump and use velocity and charge through the air. But I have to admit, questing through Secrets of the Obscure has been an absolute drag. But at the same time, some of the boss fights and the cutscenes have been awesome. And the meta event within Secrets of the Obscure is probably my favorite within the entire game. With two separate huge challenges.
I really want to play this game again for the meta events. They were so much fun. They're so good. I mean, oh man, I wish World of Warcraft had that. I mean, why Blizzard never copied the good stuff? Well, I mean, they do copy the good stuff, but they don't do it at a justifiable pace, and also they make it worse. So shame on them.
Challenging boss fights with massive rewards.
Let's make
and
something
even
good,
the
Blizzard.
potential to receive an item worth upwards of 10,000 gold. Now, while the Skyscale is super easy to unlock and use, and it's a fantastic addition to the game, something that I didn't realize while completing the expansion until almost the very end is that taking your Skyscale anywhere else in the world outside of the expansion zones is a rather arduous and daunting task. First of all, you have to go around searching Skyscale nests to find a Skyscale egg, and upon finding the egg, you'll bring it to a Skyscale trainer who introduces you to a set of achievements that are going to take a colossal amount of money and time to complete. First, you're going to need 250 of a ton of different specific materials. You're going to have to travel across the world taking the eggs to unique and difficult places. You're going to need to complete a plethora of other story content, and on top of all of that, and really what stopped me in my tracks, is that you need to have access to something known as the Living World DLC. You see, not only does Guild Wars 2 feature the main expansions, but there's also bonus content, DLCs. Everyone gets access to the Living World Season 1 for free, but Season 2, 3, 4, and eventually 5 are all paid content. These sort of act like story updates in between expansions, and in order to take the Skyscale outside of the Secrets of the Obscure map, you would need to not only purchase, but also finish the first 4 seasons of the Living World DLC, which is something I'm definitely going to do, but not quite at this moment. Now, with all of that, you're basically caught up. After Secrets of the Obscure, we are at the Janthir Wilds expansion, which was released, like I said, in 2024. At the time of releasing this video, I'm still only about 80% of the way through the entire storyline's progression. I found Janthir Wilds to be a nice callback to a bit of a simpler, less high fantasy, more simplistic vibe in terms of its aesthetics. You'll find the wilds are filled with wolves and bees and the Kodan, a new bear-like race that you'll be interacting with. This expansion saw an upgrade to the Warclaw mount, which was originally released a short while after Path of Fire. This mount used to only be usable inside of World vs. World or PvP situations. However, now, after Janthir Wilds, you can take it out and use it as more of a combat-driven mount with a few unique abilities, like taking down trees.
Actually, it looks pretty cool.
On top of that, every class gets access to a new weapon, the Land Spear. Previously, spears were aquatic-only weapons, meaning that you could only use them in underwater situations, but now, through the Mastery system, you can get a Land Spear. The first one you acquire actually looks pretty awesome, and the abilities are a ton of fun to use, and it seems to do a fair amount of damage. In fact, my new build recommends I use a Land Spear as my secondary weapon, so that's exactly what I did. Furthermore, and probably the biggest and most hype addition to the game from the Janthir Wilds expansion is the Homesteading Mastery, basically introducing player-owned housing to Guild Wars 2. Now, I'm genuinely surprised it took them till 2024 to add this into the game.
That's actually surprising.
As I mentioned before, the reward space in horizontal...
Guess how long it took Blizzard? It was supposed to be in classic World of Warcraft, and it only came in the latest patch, which is still not out by the time I'll upload this video, but it's soon to come. I think just a few days, and it's so hilarious to see. Also, they charge real life money for it too, by the way, in case you didn't know that.
Progression games can be a little tricky.
Very fun.
And so what ends up happening is a lot.
Oh, they're not charging real life money for it, just for certain elements. Dude, go to hell. Don't say it. Like, don't tell this to me. When you live inside of a hut and some player that actually spend real life money will have a skyscraper and he will spit on you from the top of it, you will know that I was right.
A lot of the reward space is filled with cosmetics.
Shame on you.
For example, something that many Guild Wars 2 players strive for is legendary equipment and weapons. These are items that can only be obtained by completing...
Not gonna lie, Guild Wars 2 armor sets slaps. I've seen some insane weapons. I think the best weapons I've seen in any MMO came from Guild Wars 2. They're crazy. Also, the armor sets are fantastic.
Some of the hardest or most tedious
fantastic
content in the game. And legendaries are equal in stats to other items. But they often have much cooler aesthetics or quality of life features that makes people want to go for them. You've probably heard the popular phrase that fashion is the true endgame. Well, that's absolutely the case in Guild Wars 2. And with this new player housing system, that only compounds that effect. Because now players can not only decorate their characters, but also their house. And really, I've had a great time with the Janthir Wilds so far. And honestly, I've had a fantastic time with every expansion within Guild Wars 2. They all add unique playstyles and systems and events and ways to navigate and traverse the world, which will completely change how you might have interacted with the world prior to owning that expansion. It's probably the only MMO I've ever played in which purchasing an expansion will actually dictate how you interact with other expansions that you purchase later on.
But it can also be a bad thing rather than good, because you pretty much force a player into buying something, because if you really want mounts, you kind of have to purchase Path of Fire, right? So it does kind of suck that players are forced to purchase all of these expansions instead of like maybe bundling all of them up together at a reasonable price. But at the same time, I do understand that player freedom is important and freedom of purchase is also really important. So keeping all of this dissected is also really good for the game. And they do really have a lot of discounts. So I guess it's fine. For what I remember, I have... Jesus, that was a nasty voice crack. But for what I remember, I have one expansion after Path of Fire. That's what I used to own. So obviously it's still relevant. I will have to purchase the recent expansions. But yeah, I mean, whenever I come to the game, I'm just gonna strictly play through the linear way because I want to experience the story at a coherent pace that makes sense. Because I don't want to skip between like the story. Story is something that is really important to me.
Now, there's plenty more to Guild Wars 2 outside of the expansions, of course. The holiday events are always particularly exciting. The World vs. World PvP system is one of the only MMO PvP systems that I genuinely find myself craving to go play.
I'm not a PvP Andy.
You team up and take on a mix of PvP and PvE while trying to dominate sections of the map, and this results in some pretty great rewards. You also don't necessarily need to find a guild or specific people to play with, as oftentimes you can just hop into the World vs. World map and join one of the groups that are already going. Another amazing aspect is the fact that this game just throws multiple level 80 characters at you. For example, upon reaching level 80, you get a brand new level 80, and every time you purchase an expansion, you also get a brand new level 80. The nice thing about this is the vast majority of progression within Guild Wars is account-wide. So all your mounts, your masteries, your homesteading, your banking, your money, so much is account-wide. And this makes hopping on a fresh level 80 a little less daunting, considering they have a massive amount of access to everything you've spent so much time unlocking thus far. But now, let's talk about this new expansion, set to release on October 28th, Visions of Eternity. Now,
so
this
it's
is going to
already
feature
out
a
by
ton
now.
of normal additions that you can expect through expansion releases, such as a new zone known as Kastora. There's going to be a new homestead added, as well as...
Is it good? Don't give me any spoilers, just tell me, like, is the expansion good?
A ton of enhancements to the skimmer.
Let me know in the comments.
Which, if you remember, is the one that glides across water. Apparently, it's going to be able to dive and soar and go a bit faster than before. But really, the main addition is these new elite skills specializations, which ArenaNet has been teasing online with images for the past few months. So I'm just going to quickly run through these. The Mesmer class will be getting access to the Troubadour spec. I probably did not say that right, but this will be a musical sort of bard specialization that I think will be using instruments.
Man, Mesmers are cool.
The Ranger, my personal main class, will be getting the Gale Shot spec, creating a sort of wind-based Ranger where your bows will generate things like tornadoes.
I also kind of want to play Ranger for some reason.
Probably going to be pretty awesome for AoE. The Guardian will be getting the Luminary spec using radiant weapons and getting access to new stances that provide passive bonuses.
Oh, yeah, I'm
thief
playing
will be
Guardian.
becoming the antiquary,
Cool.
where you basically get a small pet that can run off and steal artifacts to help you in battle. And the necromancer will be getting the ritualist spec, inspired by the original Guild Wars 1 profession. People are especially hyped about this one. On top of that, the warrior will be getting access to the Paragon spec, another callback to Guild Wars 1, and they'll be using chants and commands through a new resource known as motivation. Then the elementalists can become the evoker, where they'll just be focusing on one element at a time, as well as receiving a new companion to summon depending on said element. The engineer will be getting the amalgam spec, which replaces their tool belt, which allows them to summon and transform into different morphs. And finally, the revenant will be getting the conduit spec, another callback to one of the heroes from Guild Wars 1.
Damn, that looks cool. What the hell
All
was
in all,
that?
Guild Wars 2 has definitely had some expansions that might be more interesting or
Damn, that's
more
cool.
engaging
These
than
are some
others,
sick animations.
What
What
really
the hell?
Truly missed the mark. And Visions of Eternity sounds like it's shaping up to be an awesome
Whoa,
addition
look
to the
at
game as
that.
well. So with
that is fantastic. That is the class that calls on heroes from beyond, right? For assistance. That's cool. I remember the story behind it.
All that being said, is Guild Wars 2 worth playing in 2025? In my opinion, Guild Wars 2 is not the kind of game where you buy it once, play it for a while, and then put it down forever. At least in my experience, it's a game I play for between 1 or 2 months at a time, and then I put it down and play something else. But then 1 or 2 months later, I find myself coming back. So while it might sound daunting to say, hey,
and the beauty of it is that you can afford to do so, because you can't do this in any other MMO. In any other MMO, you drop it for like a couple of months, you come back and everyone is already done or just on the latest patch, and you're kind of left struggling behind. And that is just unfortunate reality of vertical MMOs. And I do understand why so many of you Guild Wars 2 players are telling me to go back into the game again, because everything is still relevant, and the information that I still have still holds water. So it kind of incentivized me more to try out this game. I may try it sooner than you guys think.
6 expansions
I will
you need
say
to purchase along
but probably not in the in the nearest month, like closest month, because there is a new PoE 2 patch coming soon, which I have to play.
With a bunch of DLC to access everything
it is what
in
it
Guild
is.
Wars 2, that doesn't really represent the reality of how people actually play the game. Take me, for example. I played through the base game and purchased the Heart of Thorns and the Path of Fire bundle in order to get my mount early on. I beat those 2 expansion storylines, but was still nowhere near finishing the masteries. That took me to nearly 120 hours of gameplay. And a while after that, I bought End of Dragons, and then a few months after that, I bought Secrets of the Obscure. And now here I am, almost a year after that, and I finally bought Janthir Wilds, right before this newest expansion. What I'm trying to say is that Guild Wars 2 is a game that you can take your time with, and it will respect that time because almost nothing ever becomes irrelevant.
Yep.
Literally ever. So is it worth playing in 2025? Absolutely. In my opinion, Guild Wars 2 is one of the single best MMOs to play right now. Between this game and ESO, I have completely fallen in love with horizontal progression systems in a way that I never knew I would prior to trying them myself. I really hope moving forward, ArenaNet takes some of the best parts of both Guild Wars 1 and 2 and applies them to Guild Wars 3, while adding something new and innovative. So not only am I optimistic about Guild Wars 2, but I'm optimistic about the franchise, and I don't think I can really attribute that same praise to any other MMO on the market. But
every other MMO on the market has completely crumbled or stopped to a halt. There is no vertical MMO that is thriving at the moment other than World of Warcraft, and it's all thanks to Classic, because retail is dying at a rapid pace. And right now, everyone is pretty much banking all of their money at Ashes of Creation, which is supposed to come to Steam Early Access in the, I think, next few days. Yeah, that's gonna end really poorly, by the way. I'm gonna probably purchase Ashes of Creation just to try it out and make a video about that, because I genuinely want to put my hands on this game and see if it was actually semi-close to being good game for its price tag, of course, because it does have a price. Also, it has a goddamn cash up for reasons God only knows. But I do gonna try this game for myself and just, get a feel of it. But regardless, every single MMO is shutting down while Guild Wars 2 is still going strong, which is crazy.
I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who made it to the end of the video. Don't forget a like, a comment.
It seems to be like the end of the video. Great video. I'm going to leave a link in the description so you guys can watch it, give it a like and a sub for yourself. But yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying earlier, Guild Wars 2 is so fascinating because there's so many insanely good elements about this game, which I discover with every video that I make. And at the same time, nobody's talking about this game. you don't hear anything about it. It's like almost every player inside of this game is just too busy having fun, and nobody really spread the information around. You don't hear anything about this game, good or bad. I mean, I didn't even know that there was an expansion going on right now. And this video is obviously like a couple of months before the expansion came out. Nowadays, we're after the expansion. I never even heard of it. And it's so weird because I do look out for MMO information every single day, but nobody talks about Guild Wars 2. And it's just weird. It is really weird. I don't know why it's like that. I mean, I'm so glad that I discovered this, like, YouTube thing through Guild Wars 2 players, right? So I can react to the videos that you guys give me. I genuinely love this, and I love spreading the information, even though my videos don't really get that many views because I recently made a shift to commentary and the YouTube algorithm doesn't like that. But nowadays, I'm starting to get more and more momentum, and with each momentum I gain through Guild Wars 2, I get to spread the information better because I'm a general MMO player. I played almost every MMO under the sun, but for the most part, I play World of Warcraft, and I'm really glad that I helped introduce this game to MMO players because this is good. Like, this is definitely good. And for sure, I'm gonna come back into this game. I'm gonna try to make time for it, but hopefully it will be soon. My god, it was great. Great video, regardless. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Truly amazing.